Ukraine's agriculture minister announced today that the area in which the country's spring crop will be planted might shrink by more than half this year compared with the levels expected before the Russian invasion. As a major exporter of wheat, other grains, and vegetable oils, this hit to Ukraine's production will affect the global food supply.
The next grocery trip you take might feel like stepping into a disaster movie, except it's real, and it's happening faster than anyone expected. Every day, shelves are thinning, prices are soaring, and by the time most people realize what's missing, it's already too late. Food shortages are no longer a distant threat. They're here, and they're getting worse. Over the last 3 months, key staples have become nearly impossible to find, and prices on essentials have skyrocketed by double digits. But here's the terrifying part. This isn't the peak, it's just the beginning. Right now, global supply chains are unraveling at the worst rate in 5 years. Shipping container prices have tripled since December, extreme weather is wiping out harvests, and the foods you rely on most are quietly disappearing. And it's not just the obvious basics like rice or canned goods. The real danger lies in the unexpected shortages no one is talking about. In this video, I'll reveal 30 grocery items that are on the chopping block before March ends. Forget toilet paper runs. These are the foods that will blindside shoppers the hardest. Some of them might already be vanishing from your store, and trust me, number 12 is one no one sees coming. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what to stockpile now, before these critical items disappear for good. And when you hear what's happening to powdered butter supplies, you'll understand why waiting even another week could be a huge mistake. Number 30. Ghee has been a kitchen staple for centuries, prized for its rich flavor, high smoke point, and long shelf life. But now it's vanishing fast. India, the world's largest producer, is facing a 30% spike in demand while struggling with dairy shortages due to extreme heat waves affecting cattle. Meanwhile, global butterfat prices have surged over 45% since January, tightening supply chains and pushing ghee prices toward record highs. Some major suppliers are already warning that ghee could triple in price by summer, if you can find it at all. Now is the time to stock up before costs skyrocket. If you need alternatives, rendering your own ghee from butter is an easy way to secure a long-term supply, while coconut oil or beef tallow can serve as high-heat cooking substitutes. But if you thought ghee was hard to find, wait until you see what's happening with coconut milk powder. This one's even more shocking. Number 29. Coconut milk powder might not be on your radar yet, but it's about to become one of the hardest ingredients to find, and fast. With ghee supplies dwindling and prices skyrocketing, many people are turning to dairy-free alternatives like coconut-based products. But there's just one problem. Coconut production is collapsing. The Philippines, the world's top exporter, is facing its worst drought in years, causing a 25% drop in coconut yields. Meanwhile, Sri Lanka's financial crisis has slashed exports by over 40%, leaving global markets scrambling for supply. Coconut milk powder, once a niche item, is now in high demand from food manufacturers, plant-based milk companies, and survivalists stocking up for long-term storage. Some brands have already doubled in price since February, and as shortages intensify, expect imports to slow to a trickle by April. If you rely on coconut milk powder for cooking, baking, or emergency food storage, now's the time to buy. Alternatives like almond or oat milk powder are still available, but not for long, as plant-based shortages spread across the market. And if you think this is bad, wait until you hear about what's happening to wheat germ, a powerhouse ingredient that's disappearing even faster. Number 28. Wheat germ. Coconut milk powder shortages are making plant-based alternatives harder to find. But another nutritional powerhouse is vanishing just as quickly. This tiny but mighty ingredient, packed with vitamins, minerals, and protein, is disappearing from grocery shelves at an alarming rate. Wheat germ is highly perishable due to its high oil content, meaning it requires careful storage and quick turnover. But with ongoing supply chain disruptions and rising transportation costs, major retailers are cutting back on carrying it altogether. At the same time, the global wheat market is in turmoil. Droughts in the U.S. Midwest and devastating crop failures in Ukraine and Russia have slashed global wheat supplies by nearly 20%, forcing producers to focus on basic flour production, while specialty products like wheat germ get pushed out of the market. The USDA reports that wheat production has dropped to its lowest levels in nearly a decade, meaning supplies of wheat germ will only continue to shrink. If you use wheat germ for its high protein and vitamin E content, now is the time to stock up and store it in the freezer to extend its shelf life. Alternatives like ground flaxseed or chia seeds offer similar nutritional benefits, but even those could be impacted by the growing demand for nutrient-dense food substitutes. And wheat germ isn't the only fermented, nutrient-rich staple under threat. Miso paste is facing an even bigger crisis, and this one could take years to recover from. Number 27. Miso paste. As wheat germ supplies dwindle, another nutrient-rich staple is quietly vanishing. This fermented powerhouse, packed with probiotics, umami flavor, and a long shelf life, is facing a crisis no one saw coming. Miso production depends on high-quality soybeans and traditional fermentation, but both are under threat. Japan, one of the world's largest producers, is experiencing its worst soybean crop failure in over 50 years, driven by extreme weather shifts. Meanwhile, rising energy costs have forced many small miso breweries to shut down, drastically reducing supply. At the same time, demand has exploded globally as more people seek gut-friendly, probiotic-rich foods. According to the Japanese Ministry of Agriculture, miso exports have jumped 35% since last year, while domestic production has fallen by nearly 20%, creating a massive supply gap. U.S. imports are lagging, and grocery chains are already reporting delays and price hikes of up to 50%. If miso paste is part of your cooking routine, buy now before prices surge even higher and store it in the fridge or freezer to extend its shelf life. Alternatives like fermented black bean paste or soy sauce can provide a similar umami punch, while they're still available. But miso isn't the only soy-based essential disappearing. Shelf-stable tofu, one of the best protein sources for emergencies, is running out even faster, and the reason why is shocking. Number 26. Shelf-stable tofu and miso paste isn't the only soy-based staple vanishing from shelves. Shelf-stable tofu is disappearing even faster, and the reason why is shocking. For years, this long-lasting, protein-packed food has been a go-to for vegans, preppers, and anyone looking for a meat alternative that doesn't require refrigeration. But now, global soybean shortages are hitting hard. Brazil, the world's largest soybean producer, is facing severe droughts, slashing its yield by over 20% this season, while rising tensions between the U.S. and China, one of the biggest buyers of American soy, have thrown international supply chains into chaos. With fewer soybeans on the market, producers are prioritizing high-demand items like animal feed and soy oil, leaving shelf-stable tofu in short supply. At the same time, demand for non-perishable tofu has surged globally, especially in Asian markets, where households are stockpiling in response to food security concerns. The U.S. Department of Agriculture reports that global soybean reserves have hit a 5-year low, meaning tofu production could shrink by over 30% this year, and supermarkets are already seeing delayed shipments and price hikes of up to 40% on shelf-stable tofu products. If you rely on it, buy in bulk now and store unopened packs in a cool, dark place. Alternatives like canned chickpeas, lentils, or freeze-dried tempeh can offer plant-based protein, but those could be next on the chopping block. And if you think protein shortages stop here, think again. Freeze-dried cheese, one of the longest-lasting dairy staples, is disappearing fast. Number 25. Freeze-dried cheese. With shelf-stable tofu disappearing, many are turning to long-lasting protein alternatives. But one of the best is already slipping away. Freeze-dried cheese, a staple for survivalists and emergency preppers, is facing an alarming shortage, and once it's gone, it may not return for a long time. Dairy shortages have been quietly escalating worldwide, and the problem is now hitting processed dairy products hard. The U.S. dairy industry is producing less milk than at any point in the last decade, as rising feed costs and extreme weather have decimated cattle farms. European suppliers are struggling too. Energy prices have skyrocketed, making it more expensive to process and freeze-dried dairy products. On top of that, demand for freeze-dried cheese has exploded as more people stockpile long-lasting foods. Once considered a niche survival item, it's now one of the fastest-selling emergency foods on the market. According to the U.S. Dairy Export Council, milk powder and freeze-dried dairy production has fallen by 18% since last year, and major food storage companies are warning of major delays in restocking supplies. Retailers have reported price hikes of over 50% on freeze-dried cheese in just the last 3 months, with some brands already completely out of stock. If you rely on freeze-dried cheese for food storage or camping, get it now while it's still available. Store it in a cool, dry place to maximize shelf life. If it's already hard to find, consider stocking up on powdered cheese or hard cheeses like Parmesan, which have longer shelf lives. But if you thought cheese was the ultimate survival staple, think again. Hardtack, the historic ration that can last for decades, is also disappearing, and the reason why is shocking. Number 24, hardtack. With freeze-dried cheese vanishing from emergency food supplies, many preppers are turning to another long-lasting survival staple. But even that is now at risk. Hardtack, the nearly indestructible cracker that has fueled soldiers, sailors, and pioneers for centuries, is becoming harder to find. If you thought something as simple as flour, water, and salt would always be available, think again. Hardtack relies on basic wheat flour, but the global wheat crisis is pushing specialty survival foods to the back of production lines. The war in Ukraine, one of the world's top wheat producers, has slashed exports by over 40%, while extreme droughts in the United States and Canada have devastated wheat crops. Farmers are struggling to meet demand, and major food manufacturers are prioritizing bread, pasta, and staple flours, leaving hardtack production at a standstill. Meanwhile, demand for emergency food rations has skyrocketed, with bulk survival food suppliers running out of stock faster than ever, forcing many brands to place strict purchase limits on hardtack products. According to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, wheat reserves are at their lowest levels in nearly 15 years, making long-lasting flour-based products like hardtack harder to produce. Some survival food retailers have reported a 300% increase in orders for long shelf-life foods, causing supply bottlenecks and delivery delays of 3 to 6 months. If you want to secure a supply of hardtack, buy it now before the remaining stock sells out. Alternatively, you can make your own using whole wheat flour and salt, then bake and store it in an airtight container for decades of shelf life. If hardtack disappears completely, consider stocking up on pilot bread or matzo, which can serve as a similar long-lasting alternative. But if you think basic survival foods like hardtack are the only ones disappearing, think again. Dehydrated butter powder, one of the most overlooked but essential emergency staples, is about to get even harder to find. Number 23, dehydrated butter powder. First, it was fresh butter. Now, even dehydrated butter powder, the secret weapon for bakers, campers, and survivalists, is disappearing. It's shelf-stable, easy to store, and a lifeline when refrigeration isn't an option, but supply is running dry and the few remaining brands are vanishing faster than anyone expected. Dairy shortages aren't just affecting fresh milk and cheese. They're wiping out entire categories of powdered dairy. With butterfat reserves plummeting, producers are choosing to prioritize fresh butter over powdered alternatives, cutting supply chains at the source. At the same time, heat waves and feed shortages have slashed dairy herd populations, reducing production across the board. And here's the real kicker. A surge in emergency food stockpiling has put dehydrated butter powder in the spotlight. Once a niche item, it's now one of the first things disappearing from survival food suppliers and bulk retailers. Orders have spiked so dramatically that some manufacturers have halted new shipments entirely. Global butter production has dropped by nearly 20%, and the price of dehydrated dairy has soared by over 50% in just 6 months, according to the U.S. Dairy Export Council. Several survival food retailers have issued purchase limits as demand outpaces supply, with some reporting delays of 6 months or more for restocking. If you rely on dehydrated butter powder for baking or food storage, this may be your last chance to buy it before it becomes a specialty item with a premium price tag. Store it in an airtight container in a cool, dry place to extend its shelf life. If you can't find it, consider alternatives like ghee or coconut oil, both of which offer long-lasting fat sources for cooking. But while butter powder shortages are bad, they pale in comparison to what's happening with egg powder, an essential food that's already on its way to extinction. Number 22. If you thought egg powder was too basic to be in danger, think again. It's quickly becoming one of the most elusive items in the grocery aisle. Behind the scenes, a devastating avian flu outbreak has wiped out millions of egg-laying hens, triggering a domino effect few saw coming. While fresh eggs have dominated the headlines, it's powdered eggs that are now the quiet casualty. Used in everything from baking mixes to emergency food kits, egg powder was once easy to overlook. Now it's nearly impossible to find. As egg producers scramble to meet fresh demand, dry egg production has been slashed, and bulk orders are being canceled outright. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, dried egg exports have plummeted, and prices have more than doubled since autumn. Manufacturers are facing months-long delays, while survival retailers have begun labeling egg powder as out of stock indefinitely. If it's a pantry staple for you, this might be the final window to stock up. It lasts for years when sealed properly, but alternatives like canned eggs, flax meal, or chia seeds simply don't measure up in nutrition or texture. And if you thought shortages were limited to the farm, think again. Canned clams and oysters, long considered a reliable shelf-stable protein, are now disappearing under a wave of problems both above and below the sea. Number 21. Canned clams and oysters. Just as seafood lovers scramble for their last cans of salmon or crab, a quieter crisis is brewing beneath the surface. Canned clams and oysters are disappearing, and fast. Climate shifts have devastated coastal ecosystems, wiping out wild shellfish beds with warming waters, toxic algae blooms, and pollution. Onshore, processing plants are cutting capacity due to labor shortages and rising fuel costs. The result? A rapid collapse in supply few are talking about. NOAA reports a 40% drop in shellfish yields, and canned oyster prices have soared over 60% in the last year alone. What used to be a dependable pantry protein is now being cleared from shelves by both chefs and survivalists. If you want it, get it, before it becomes gourmet priced or gone entirely. Alternatives like smoked mussels or sardines still hold, but their window may be closing too. And while that's a blow to your dinner menu, what's next hits even deeper. Dandelion root tea, a once obscure herbal drink, is vanishing for reasons no one expected. Number 20. Dandelion root tea. After watching protein-rich staples vanish from shelves, few expected a quiet herbal tea to join the list. But dandelion root tea is disappearing fast, and most shoppers have no idea why. Once a niche wellness item, it exploded in popularity during the pandemic for its detox and liver-supporting properties. But unlike mass-produced teas, dandelion roots are either wild harvested or carefully cultivated in clean soil, making them highly sensitive to environmental changes. Now, erratic weather, soil degradation, and overharvesting have hit supply chains hard. Farmers are switching to more profitable medicinal crops, leaving dandelion production behind. According to global trade data, demand has doubled in just 2 years, while supply continues to shrink, leading to empty bulk bins and months-long shipping delays. Some major brands have even pulled it from their product lines entirely. If it's part of your daily ritual, don't wait. Stock up now, especially on organic or roasted varieties. Alternatives like burdock or milk thistle tea can work in a pinch, but they're not far behind in scarcity. And if you think herbal teas are the only quiet casualties, think again. Pumpkin seed butter, a nutrient-dense spread gaining cult status, is next in line for extinction. Number 19. Pumpkin seed butter. After herbal teas like dandelion root vanished from shelves, now it's a superfood spread quietly slipping through the cracks. Pumpkin seed butter. Once a niche favorite, it's now a go-to for those with nut allergies, clean eaters, and anyone chasing nutrient-dense plant-based options. But while demand has surged, the supply hasn't kept pace. These seeds don't come from jack-o'-lantern pumpkins. They're sourced from specialized varieties grown mostly in Austria and a few U.S. states, both hit by droughts, labor shortages, and crop disease. And unlike mass-produced peanut butter, pumpkin seed butter is made in small-scale facilities that can't ramp up quickly. According to global seed suppliers, demand is up over 80%, while harvests are down sharply. Some brands have quietly shrunk their jars or pulled listings altogether. If it's part of your pantry, grab what you can now. For those searching for alternatives, sunflower butter or tahini might do, for now. And while you're scanning the shelves for spreads, keep an eye on something even more overlooked. Sun-dried tomatoes and olive oil, a flavor-packed essential that's disappearing fast for reasons no one expected. Number 18. Sun-dried tomatoes and olive oil. Pumpkin seed butter may be vanishing from health aisles, but what's next is a Mediterranean classic you probably didn't expect. Sun-dried tomatoes and olive oil. Beloved for their rich, concentrated flavor, they've quietly become a kitchen essential in everything from pastas to antipasti. But behind the scenes, this pantry favorite is being hit from both sides. Southern Europe's tomato harvests have been decimated by extreme heat, drought, and crop disease, and the few remaining yields are being funneled into fresh markets, not preserves. At the same time, the Mediterranean olive oil crisis has caused producers to ration every drop, leaving oil-packed products like these at the bottom of the priority list. Industry data reveals a 40% drop in tomato yields, paired with a record-breaking plunge in olive oil output, driving prices for sun-dried tomatoes up sharply and thinning shelf supply across major retailers. If you love their tangy richness, don't wait. Grab a few jars now or look for dry-packed versions while they last. And if preserved produce like this is on the chopping block, you'll want to pay close attention to what's happening with pickled lemons, a bold, fermented staple from global kitchens that's facing an even steeper decline. Number 17. If sun-dried tomatoes are vanishing from Mediterranean kitchens, then pickled lemons are quietly becoming the next casualty, especially in North African and Middle Eastern pantries. This tangy, fermented staple isn't just a bold flavor booster. It's a cultural cornerstone in everything from stews to marinades. But now it's disappearing fast. The same citrus crisis impacting juice production has dried up the supply of preserving-grade lemons, the small, firm, slightly underripe ones that pickle best. Farmers are prioritizing fresh fruit sales, leaving little behind for fermentation. At the same time, traditional producers in Morocco and Egypt are facing export slowdowns and rising container costs, forcing delays or outright cancellations of international shipments. Citrus harvests in key regions are down nearly 50%, and several top brands have pulled pickled lemons from shelves or marked them seasonal only. If you've ever wanted to try them, this might be your last easy chance. Grab a jar now or learn how to make your own while lemons are still around. And while we're on the topic of fermented foods, another powerhouse is now on the brink. Number 16. After watching pickled lemons vanish from shelves, the next unexpected shortage hits even closer to Japan's culinary core. Natto, the sticky, fermented soybean dish packed with probiotics and plant-based protein. Once a niche food known for its polarizing texture and flavor, natto has exploded in global demand thanks to its gut health benefits and clean protein profile. But its production depends on a very specific, small soybean variety, grown mainly in Japan and parts of the US, that's now being squeezed by climate extremes, shifting farm priorities, and shrinking crop rotations. Unlike mass-market soy, natto beans require careful cultivation and a precise fermentation process that doesn't scale easily. With supply chains tightening and Japanese producers pulling back exports to meet local demand, availability is shrinking fast. Japan's agriculture ministry reports a 25% drop in natto-grade soybean production, while worldwide demand has surged over 70%. If you love it or have been meaning to try it, now's your moment. Frozen options store well, and while kimchi or tempeh can offer probiotic benefits, they're no match for natto's nutritional edge. And if the land-grown staples are this fragile, wait until you hear what's happening beneath the waves. Dried seaweed, another Japanese superfood, is now facing a tide of problems that could pull it off shelves entirely. Number 15. After natto's unexpected fall into scarcity, another Japanese culinary staple is now riding the tide out: dried seaweed. Once a dependable source of flavor, nutrients, and umami in everything from miso soup to sushi, dried seaweed is quietly becoming harder to find. The culprit? A brewing environmental crisis beneath the surface. Rising ocean temperatures, pollution, and acidification are disrupting seaweed farms across Japan, Korea, and China. In places like Korea, nori production is down by 30%, while Japan's kombu harvests have been slashed in half due to aggressive algae blooms and new marine diseases. At the same time, global demand is booming, not just for food, but for supplements and even eco-packaging, making this ocean crop a hot commodity in a shrinking market. Prices have surged nearly 60% in the past year, and some exporters have begun rationing supply. If seaweed is part of your kitchen routine, grab extra now, especially roasted or dried formats. And while the ocean's offerings dwindle, the land is next to feel the pressure. Tamarind paste, a tangy staple across South Asian, Latin, and fusion cuisines, is quickly becoming the next vanishing act. Number 14. As dried seaweed vanishes from shelves, another culinary cornerstone is slipping through the cracks. Tamarind paste, the rich, tangy powerhouse behind iconic dishes across India, Southeast Asia, the Caribbean, and Latin America. This ingredient isn't just a flavor booster, it's the soul of countless sauces, chutneys, and marinades. But tamarind trees, usually hardy and drought-tolerant, are now buckling under erratic climate swings. Severe droughts followed by floods have slashed harvests in India, Thailand, and Mexico. With global demand skyrocketing, driven by everything from wellness drinks to factory-made condiments, small producers are overwhelmed. Add in long prep times and low profit margins, and tamarind is quietly disappearing from both ethnic grocers and big-name stores. India's exports alone have dropped nearly 30%, while demand in Western markets has surged over 50%, creating a sharp gap that's only widening. If you use tamarind regularly or even occasionally, now's the time to grab an extra jar or two, because this flavor may soon become a rare luxury. And if that wasn't enough, even vegan staples aren't safe. Nutritional yeast, the beloved plant-based cheese substitute, is the next item teetering on the edge. Number 13. Coming right after tamarind paste's quiet disappearance, another unsung hero of modern kitchens is now under fire: nutritional yeast. Once reserved for health food stores and vegan cookbooks, these golden flakes have found their way into everything from dairy-free sauces to protein-rich snacks and popcorn toppings. But behind their rising fame lies a fragile, overlooked production process. Nutritional yeast is grown using molasses-fed cultures and requires precise fermentation, drying, and fortification. With global molasses shortages, spiking energy prices, and many facilities pivoting toward higher-margin biotech fermentation, the supply is crumbling. Small batch output across North America has dropped by nearly 40%, while European producers are halting production altogether due to mounting costs. Shelf space is dwindling fast, and prices have doubled in under 6 months. If you count on Nooch for that savory, cheesy kick or your daily dose of B vitamins, now's the time to grab extra and store it in a cool, airtight place. And if that caught you off guard, brace yourself. Powdered vinegar, a shelf-stable flavor bomb used in rubs, marinades, and survival kits, is the next sleeper essential, vanishing without warning. Number 12. The moment you've all been waiting for, number 12, is here. And it's a curveball most never saw coming: powdered vinegar. This underrated pantry powerhouse has flown under the radar for years, quietly adding a bold punch to dry rubs, instant noodles, and survival meals without needing refrigeration. But behind its shelf-stable brilliance is a fragile dependency: maltodextrin, a corn-derived carrier that's buckling under the pressure of climate volatility, ethanol demands, and fractured global supply chains. With U.S. food-grade maltodextrin output dropping by 22% and powdered vinegar prices spiking nearly 60% in just months, the writing's on the wall. To make matters worse, smaller manufacturers are ditching food-grade batches in favor of more profitable cleaning-grade versions. So if you rely on this tangy, no-mess flavor fix, it's time to grab it while you still can. Because up next is a gourmet ingredient so rare, even upscale grocers are struggling to keep it on shelves: black garlic. Number 11. If powdered vinegar was the stealth essential vanishing from shelves, then black garlic is the gourmet wildcard on the brink of extinction. Known for its deep, umami-rich flavor and caramelized sweetness, black garlic has become a prized ingredient in upscale restaurants and plant-based kitchens alike. But few realize just how delicate its production process is. It requires a month-long fermentation under meticulously controlled heat and humidity, and with rising energy prices and stricter food safety regulations, producers are scaling back dramatically. South Korea, the world's leading exporter, has cut back shipments by over 35%, and U.S. small batch makers are shutting down aging rooms due to soaring costs. What used to be a rare treat is quickly turning into an unaffordable luxury. Online retailers are limiting purchases, and prices have nearly doubled in just a few months. If you love layering its rich depth into sauces, spreads, or even on toast, now's the time to grab what you can. And speaking of plant-based favorites slipping away, Next up is canned jackfruit, a vegan meat alternative now facing a perfect storm of agricultural and shipping setbacks. Number 10. If black garlic signaled the gourmet crunch, then canned jackfruit is the wake-up call for every plant-based pantry. Once a go-to in vegan kitchens for mimicking pulled pork, bulking up tacos, and anchoring meatless curries, jackfruit is now vanishing at an alarming pace. The cause? A storm of disruptions hitting all at once. India and Sri Lanka, the top exporters, are facing erratic monsoons, brutal droughts, and a farm labor crisis that's slowing harvest to a crawl. Add a global aluminum shortage to the mix, and canning operations are buckling. Even when jackfruit is processed, shipping delays and price hikes are making it harder for stores to restock. Exports have plunged nearly 40% in just a year, and unlike other vegetables, fresh jackfruit is no easy substitute. It's massive, perishable, and labor-intensive. If it's a staple in your pantry, now's the time to grab it. And if you're looking to make smarter food choices across the board, click the top right corner to watch our video on the 6 best and 6 worst places to buy meat. You'll want to know where to shop before the next shortage hits. Up next, a sticky old-school essential that's quietly disappearing: molasses. Number 9. If jackfruit was the surprise twist, molasses is the old-school essential quietly slipping away. Once a cheap, abundant byproduct of sugar production, molasses is now caught in the crossfire of climate chaos and shifting global priorities. Sugarcane yields in Louisiana and India have dropped sharply due to relentless rainstorms, prolonged droughts, and a growing diversion of crops toward ethanol production. Refineries that used to churn out molasses are now scaling back, and the USDA confirms a sharp dip in domestic output. For bakers, brewers, and barbecue lovers, this means your favorite thick, dark syrup might not be on the shelves much longer. Whether you use it for gingerbread, marinades, or natural iron supplements, grab a jar while you still can. And if you think molasses is old-fashioned, wait until you hear what's happening to a gourmet delicacy. Canned escargot is next on the endangered list. Number 8. Once a quirky luxury found in gourmet kitchens, canned escargot is now quietly vanishing from store shelves, and fast. After molasses' sticky exit, this French delicacy is slipping away not because of demand, but because the supply chain has buckled under the weight of climate shifts and tariffs. France and Eastern Europe, where most edible snails are raised, have seen erratic weather damage fragile breeding cycles. Add in increased import costs, and suddenly these once shelf-stable tins are becoming rare commodities. Some specialty grocers report shipments cut in half since last spring, while others have pulled them entirely due to skyrocketing wholesale prices. If you've ever been curious to try escargot or want to preserve a taste of old-world cuisine, now is the time. Because what's next to disappear from your wellness pantry might surprise you. Chia seeds, the tiny superfood with a massive footprint, are in serious trouble. Number 7. Once considered a fringe superfood, chia seeds have quietly become a mainstream staple, tossed into smoothies, overnight oats, and protein bars. But now this tiny powerhouse is vanishing from shelves just as quickly as it rose to fame. What's behind it? A perfect storm of climate extremes hammering the primary growers in South America, particularly Bolivia and Paraguay. These regions are experiencing historic droughts, crippling harvests and causing global shipments to slow to a trickle. At the same time, demand has skyrocketed, driven by a surge in plant-based eating and wellness trends. Experts say wholesale prices are already up nearly 40% from last year, with more hikes on the way as bulk suppliers cap exports. If chia is part of your daily ritual, now's the time to stock up, because next on the chopping block is an ancient energy food that's even harder to replace. Number 6. If you've ever stocked up on pemmican, an old-school survival food made of dried meat, rendered fat, and berries, you might want to double-check your pantry. This centuries-old staple, revered for its long shelf life and dense nutrition, is now fading from store shelves. The issue isn't just one ingredient, it's the perfect storm. Droughts in northern berry-producing regions, rising costs in grass-fed meat, and new international regulations on exporting animal fat products have all collided. Artisanal producers are cutting back, and major suppliers are dropping it from their catalogs altogether. According to the North American Survival Alliance, availability has plummeted by over half in the past year. So whether you're into prepping, hiking, or just crave ancestral snacks, this is one to snag before it disappears. And speaking of essentials vanishing without warning, next up is an unlikely kitchen hero you may not realize is on its way out. Number 5. Powdered gelatin and agar-agar may seem like specialty items, tucked away in the corners of baking aisles or health food shelves, but behind the scenes, they're turning into prized commodities. With more consumers making homemade gummies, protein snacks, and vegan desserts, demand has surged beyond expectations. But here's the real kicker. Climate stress has hit red seaweed farming hard, slashing agar-agar yields, while gelatin production is facing bottlenecks due to a slowdown in global meat processing. According to industry trackers, prices have soared nearly 50% in just the past year. These aren't just dessert ingredients. They're foundational for shelf-stable survival foods, medical-grade supplements, and even pet products. And if you think this shortage is niche, just wait. The next item disappearing isn't sweet or trendy. Number 4. Once a quiet staple on emergency pantry shelves, canned goat's milk has suddenly become one of the most in-demand and hardest to find dairy alternatives in the market. With rising lactose intolerance rates, baby formula shortages, and a global push toward shelf-stable, nutrient-rich foods, this creamy protein-packed option has seen a surge in demand that processors can't keep up with. Goat farmers, especially in the US and New Zealand, report feed costs soaring and herd sizes shrinking due to heat waves and drought-stricken pastures. Meanwhile, smaller canning facilities are overwhelmed, leading to erratic shipments and price hikes. If you use canned goat's milk for baking, nutrition, or infant feeding, securing a few extra cans now might be a smart move. And the pressure isn't easing. Next up, another humble classic making an unexpected comeback. Sorghum syrup, the southern sweetener quietly vanishing from breakfast tables and baking aisles alike. Number 3. Once a hidden gem of southern kitchens, sorghum syrup is now quietly vanishing from store shelves. And it's not just because it's underrated. As we move from dairy challenges like canned goat's milk into the realm of specialty sweeteners, sorghum is being hit by a perfect storm. Extreme droughts are hammering crops in the southern United States, while rising production costs and fewer artisan producers are pushing this old-school syrup toward extinction. Once prized for its rich, earthy sweetness and versatility in everything from marinades to gluten-free baking, sorghum is now in short supply, with harvests dropping significantly in the past year. And with a surge in health-conscious shoppers seeking natural alternatives to refined sugar, what little remains is flying off the shelves. If you've never tried it, now might be your last chance. And while we're talking rare treats, brace yourself. Smoked mussels are next on the chopping block. Number 2. Smoked mussels, once a hidden gem of gourmet pantries and survival kits alike, are now edging toward rarity. These smoky, nutrient-packed bites have long been prized for their protein density and rich umami flavor, but climate disruptions are threatening their future. With ocean temperatures rising and wild mussel habitats under increasing stress, harvests from trusted regions like New Zealand and coastal Maine have plummeted. Add to that the ripple effects of marine pollution and stricter fishing quotas, and supply is drying up just as demand spikes from health-conscious consumers and culinary enthusiasts. Some brands are already reporting delays and limited stock, and prices are quietly climbing with each shipment. If smoked mussels are a staple in your cupboard or charcuterie board, now's the time to grab a few tins before they're gone. And if you're into versatile, nutrient-dense pantry goods, number 1. Once a gourmet secret and a pantry staple for high-protein snacking, smoked mussels are quietly slipping away from shelves, and most consumers haven't noticed yet. But chefs and supply chain experts have. Rising ocean temperatures have disrupted mussel habitats from Maine to New Zealand, triggering a major supply contraction. The Marine Conservation Institute reports that warmer waters are shrinking mussel yields, and with global demand rising in both luxury dining and survivalist circles, prices are quietly skyrocketing. The shift isn't just seasonal, it's systemic. Cans that once gathered dust are now rare finds. If you spot smoked mussels, don't hesitate. They're shelf-stable, nutrient-rich, and quickly becoming a collector's item in the grocery world. And as we wrap this list, one thing's clear. These shortages aren't just passing trends, they're a warning. From olive oil to seafood, the global food system is under strain. Stock smart, diversify your pantry, and be ahead of the curve, because the items we take for granted today may be the ones we miss tomorrow. So let's break it down. Olive oil, vanishing fast. Coffee, prices doubling overnight. Chocolate, practically a luxury item now. And that's just scratching the surface. Black garlic, powdered vinegar, and even canned goat's milk are disappearing from shelves before most shoppers even realize what's happening. These aren't isolated issues, they're the result of cascading supply chain breakdowns, extreme weather, and global production slowdowns. But here's the good news. You don't need to panic. You do need to prepare. A few smart moves now, like stocking up, exploring alternatives, or just being aware of what's at risk, can save you serious money, time, and stress down the road. This isn't about fear, it's about staying one step ahead. If this video helped you, subscribe and watch our Stay Prepared playlist. We're tracking global supply chain trends to keep you informed and ready. And now I want to hear from you. Have you already noticed these items disappearing from your local stores? Drop a comment below. I read every one. And finally, a quick shout out to this amazing community. Last month, many of you shared what was missing in your region, and the patterns were eye-opening. If you want real-time updates on what's vanishing next and how to stay ahead, make sure you're subscribed and following along. We're in this together.